But yes, hi everybody, welcome. To this Otters workshop. Going to be discussing ethics and ethical considerations when undertaking citizen science projects around water, marine and freshwater, and water stewardship. I'll give a brief introduction, some housekeeping. Are you able to see that? Cool. And can you hear me all right? Because I had some difficulties before.
Yes.
Okay, great. Yes, so this is a workshop on ethical issues. We also had one end of last year around more specific legal issues, and kind of the aim is to bring all these together into a threshold report later. But to give a bit of a background to the project and to Otters, just some quick housekeeping. If you can please keep yourself muted. Apart from when we'll get to the panel discussion later, you can always unmute yourself and ask a question if you'd like. But yes, keep yourself muted. Please ask questions throughout the session, throughout presentations, and we'll try and get to them during the discussion. We might also just ask them directly after the presentations as well. And also just to let you know that we're recording this meeting. It will be made public afterwards on the Otters YouTube channel, but we'll make sure that everything's edited. And slides should also be shared as well by the speakers. So yes, unfortunately, we weren't able to have Professor Bagramian with us today, but we're very pleased to have Dr. Michel Barbier, an ethics expert for the European Commission, who's been working for the EU and in this ethics area for a long time. Also project manager at INRIA, and also a marine biologist. And also we have Dr. David Resnick, who was a bioethicist at the National Institute of the Environmental Health Sciences, as well as a senior advisor for research integrity to the intramural program at the National Institutes of Health. So yeah, it's very esteemed speakers, and we're very, very pleased to have you both with us. There's Michelle. And then just in terms of moderating this session, there's myself, Joe from EXA, I'm a communications officer, and my colleague Franzi's policy officer from the European Citizen Science Association. We're a partner of the Otters project. We also have many of the other consortium members from different organizations here with us today who are involved in Otters. Here's the agenda. I'll give a quick introduction, and then we'll have the talk from Michelle on environmental and biodiversity considerations around ethics. And then we'll have the talk from David around data ownership and authorship. And then we'll have panel discussions and breakout groups, time dependent. And then we'll wrap up. So a quick overview of Otters. This is the full name. It's a Horizon Europe project. It's lasting until, started January 2023 until 25. It's a budget of €1 million. And the aim is to really promote citizen science in water-based projects and sort of coordinate and cluster different citizen science water projects, as well as sort of standardized citizen science in this area. We have 12 partners from different organizations. And this is kind of a graph to sort of visualize what I was just explaining about the different approach that we're using in the project. So standardization of citizen science projects, evaluation of effectiveness, best practices, and then clustering different initiatives. So yes, please follow us on social media. But I think without further ado, I will hand over to Michelle for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. So I will share my slides. Here they are. And thank you for the invitation. So I'm a marine scientist by background, so I'm more, I have more knowledge on this topic, but it's not very difficult to extend the concept of ethics to water in a more global area. So let me give you just my viewpoint. So we are all living on Earth. We are the responsibility to share our resource, but also to protect this resource and to take action for a stewardship about the Earth and to ensure a sustainable, stable, and resilient Earth system. And this is the scientists, this is their responsibility to provide the best knowledge, to develop trusting relationship, be honest and fair, optimize, share, respect cultural diversity, and protect the environment. So there are many, many activities at seas, and I guess in the river. So you know the maritime traffic is huge. You can see on this map. When you go outside, it's very important when you go on the river doing some sampling or doing other activities. It's very important to not drop your trash in the water. And also when you are using different type of instrument, if it is the case, to be careful because this has an impact on the marine mammals. So this is, the idea is really to identify how, which impact is your research activities, what is this impact on the environment, and try to manage and to find mitigation actions in order to avoid too much burden to the environment. Also, when we organize oceanographic cruises, it's very important to respect the gender, to respect women, because you know, when you go on a ship for a long time, it can be difficult for some women. So this is really important, and the fairness and honesty, because you have different communities, different culture going on these cruises. You have to protect the environment because, you know, these are the different legislation, and it's a generic map of the environmental protection. So you see there are many. And you also have to know that there is this EU maritime security strategy deployed now in different countries, meaning that whatever you do, whatever are your research activities that you are planning at sea, you may need some authorization. Also, you may need to have authorization to conduct some research activities in marine protected area. So it's a matter of checking in your country, in your region, to contact the maritime territorial affairs in order to check if authorization or not are needed, because this is really depending on at the national level. So the waters and the seas and the rivers, there is an amazing biodiversity in there. It's amazing, and this biodiversity can produce some metabolites, for example, that are extremely powerful and useful for to be used as medicine. We have maybe, you know, some antibiotics or some medication that have been extracted from sponges to fight leukemia, lymphoma. We have also some other molecules that have been extracted from tunicate, and they are very effective on the sarcoma soft tissue. And these are not the only one. We can also use marine biodiversity as a protection against the floods or tsunami. You know that seaweeds can be a really good wall to protect the coast. We have also the use of marine or freshwater organisms for our well-being, but also for agriculture, because, you know, we can have some seaweeds also for the protection of the agriculture plants, the plants, or for the cows. So it's not only about medicine, it's about the different, very large potential application. And this is important because, I try to go to the next slide, because this is synonymous of money. In 2022, the marine biotech revenue are almost $6 billion, and it could reach even, at least double by 2032. So it means because there is a lot of budget, a lot of money, it raised some concern. One concern is the concept of access and benefit sharing of the resources that we collect and we use. If you see this map, which is a map of the known biodiversity hotspot, in red, the terrestrial one, and in yellow, the marine one, you can see that there are a lot of hotspots in this near the equator. But if you look at the map of the Earth that is designed based on the gross domestic product and which reproduce, it's a map by anamorphosis, you can see that in fact, 15% of the population control the rest of the world. You see the northern countries that are very rich, very wealthy, while the equator that we saw earlier is very, very, much more poor. So it means that in some case, we have the USA, Germany, and Japan who own 70% of the patent linked to marine genes. And just 6 countries together owns 98%. And this patent linked to marine genes means that there is some business behind. And you see, none of them are belonging, none of these countries are belonging to the low and middle income countries. So this is why in 92, during the Rio Earth Summit, the Convention on Biological Diversity has been voted and entered into force very, very quickly. The 3 main objectives was the conservation, and is still the conservation of this diversity, the sustainable use of its component, and the fair and equitable sharing of benefits. And this is the last item that is now part of this Nagoya Protocol you probably have heard about, where you need to ask authorization to access and use the use of the genetic resource belonging to a country. And this is true for scientific research, but also for commercial use. So not only for companies that will make some money out of it, but also for the scientific research. And if you see on this map, you will understand. So you have the territorial sea and the exclusive economic zone, which is 200 nautical miles from the adjacent country. All the water, the seawater column, everything that you collect in this area is under the sovereignty of the adjacent country. So it means if you want to collect some samples, even if it's water, you know, just simple samples, but if you want to work on the genetic resources of these samples, you need authorization from the adjacent country. And now, you know, in the high seas, beyond this area, now you have the High Seas Treaty that has just been voted in 2023, and it will take time, but it's also about protecting the resources, and this concept of access and benefit sharing is really important, and it concerns the genetic resources, and it includes also the genetic information. So this is a very important point. So whenever you go sampling, because for internal waters, you are also under the jurisdiction of the country. Another point in ethics is if you work with animals, you know that you need some approval in order to obtain from the ethics committee this approval, giving some detail on the experimentation, the justification of the animal use. You need to adhere to the 3 R's principle, which is replacement, reduction, and refinement. And also be careful if you are working on endangered species. The transportation of this species from one country to another one is under this CITES. This convention is a really important one, and you have to be aware of this instrument if you want to be compliant with the legislation. Also, you will be working a lot with citizen scientists, I would say, or citizen science with the civil society. So there are some very important aspects. First, to respect the cultural differences. For example, if you go sampling in some more area, non-European area, you have to be very respectful. You need, anytime you engage someone in your research activities, you need to obtain their consent. You need to explain why you work with them, what is the objective of the overall project, the objective of their task, who is your contact, what are the benefits, the constraints, and you have also to mention that they have the right to withdraw at any time their participation. So those are the regular requirements that we have at the European Commission. You need to have a very clear recruitment process when you want to invite people outside of your consortium to participate in your research activities. You need to provide the informed consent procedures to explain to those persons how you will process their personal data. You need also to design the information sheet, giving them some information on what they have to do. And why not thinking about this, the design of a policy about incidental or unexpected findings. What should we do if we are sampling in the water and then suddenly we see something that is terrible, like you see someone, I don't know, starting a fire in a forest or someone aggressing somebody else. You need to have a policy. If you meet this kind of problem, what should we do? Maybe there is an ethics committee set up for the project, or there is an ethics committee at the institution of the organization. So just think about these, how to react if you have to face this kind of problem. So the personal data, you know that you have to protect the personal data of the participant, and if your organization has a data protection officer, this is even perfect. But I think David will probably give you a talk on that aspect afterward. Another point I would like to address, the open access to data is great because it impacts science. It's a really, the data have to be fair and you want to share them, but there are some limits, and the limits is in sharing data in real time. If you give information on marine resources while you are at sea, for example, saying, posting on social media, I just saw a shark or a whale at this exact location, then you provide some information of species who might be endangered, and this can have an impact for such as excessive tourism, exploitation, overexploitation. So be careful about what you put on social media and what do you share in real time. So usually we do not give a very precise geolocation, or we delay the release of this information by several days or hours. So social media, disinformation and misinformation. Well, you know, misinformation is the fact that people transfer or forward some messages and misunderstand them and bring into the society some false information, but it's not intentional. Why disinformation is really, the objective is really to manipulate the society. And in our case, I do not think this will be relevant, but anytime you put some messages on social media, be very careful, choose your word carefully in order to not bring confusion and people just transform whatever you say into false information. So this is your responsibility, I think. Talking about AI, you probably had a talk this morning about AI, but you know, if you are using this tool, you must demonstrate that you are working in a trustworthy manner. And to help you, there is this ethics guideline for trustworthy AI that has been published in 2018 by a high-level expert group on AI that is available. And the idea is really to build a human-centric AI. And you know probably that the AI Act, the first legislation on AI, has been released, but it's still under discussion. So the main principles You have, when you develop a software, or you need to always ensure that there is a human agency and oversight. You need to ensure the privacy of the data. You need to demonstrate the robustness and the safety, but also be transparent. If you develop tools that will be tools to help decision makers to take decision, you have to explain very well how this AI provides you advice, be transparent, avoid bias, or if you have bias, just explain the limitation of this tool, the AI system that you are using. You also need to ensure that there is a societal environmental well-being, and to find this, to define the accountability. And specifically when you provide some decision maker helping tools. These are more guidelines that you can have access. So you will have the link to access these different. These are in English. This is in French, but this is very useful. So overall, maybe I'm very fast, but I will have time to answer a question if any. So the main ethics principle are really to ensure the autonomy of the person, to protect his dignity, his privacy, to ensure that the freedom is respected, the integrity of the activities you are performing, conducting, and the equity and fairness. And this is in different sectors, in health, in safety and security. It's about avoiding vulnerability, avoiding misuse of your research activities, avoiding any risk for democracy. And the geopolitics is also very important. So maybe I was too fast. I don't know. I already finished.
That was great. Thank you, Michelle. Very interesting and kind of far-reaching presentation. We have a question in the chat from Dory. Do you want to ask your question, Dory?
Yes, sure. Thank you, first of all, for an engaging talk. I found two of the principles to be sometimes slightly contrasting. Open access, for example, is something that is a part of fair data management, and indeed, data has to be accessible, not only findable. And in order to get to fair data, many times the principle of equity it contrasts it, because we have to pay a lot of money to publish, and also this means that citizen science projects many times not only on land but in marine spaces as well tend to be sort of grassroots projects that are either self-funded and in the earlier stages. So that sort of sometimes precludes us from pushing more data and more publication in journals. So these sort of principles sometimes of funding on one end and funding and equity on one end, and the openness of the data.
No.
How do you sell this?
How do I sell? So in fact, ethics is not always all white or all black. It's always a case-by-case discussion. When I do the ethics evaluation at the European level, when we are evaluating ERC proposal, we have 20 person around the table. So it's never one line. It's always, you have the big principles, and then you have to adapt depending on the context, depending on the situation, on the countries, because the low and middle income countries maybe should not be considered the same way that the wealthy countries are. So there are very many different aspects. And I do not know if you have an ethics committee or an ethics board in your project, but maybe it would be nice. Then anytime you have this kind of question, okay, what should I do? Then maybe you refer to them, ask them what would be in this situation your advice, because it's not, you know, it's not one situation. It's always depending on the context. But for the open access, you understand that you cannot release. You know that this, I think there was a software or an application providing real-time data regarding wells for boats, for the navigation of boats. So of course, it's a good idea. However, all the sailors or fishers will take this information. So now the policy is that we deliver this information either with delay, either we give a very vast, broad geolocalization. So you see, in one hand, anything you do could be in good purpose, but there is this potential misuse. And this misuse, you never exactly know. But if you can identify what are these misuse, you can anticipate and define policy or define how should I react if I face this. It's like this incidental findings. How do I, if I see someone making something create a danger for the society, what should I do? Should I call the police? Should I refer? So you see this kind of situation. So if you have a clear roadmap, what should I do if I face this? And an ethics committee, either in your organization, I don't know if you have a research organization with you or if you have many NGOs, but this is what I would, and I know maybe the answer is not what you want, but it's never very, very transparent, and we have to adapt. I see the poster of the Grand Bleu behind. It's good.
Thank you.
Thanks both. I mean, yeah, we will have some more discussion later, but does anyone have another question for Michelle now? We could probably get another question now. Garabet, would you like to come in?
Yeah, a small comment on that note with regards to publication. From personal experience as a researcher, what I tried to do in the past, whenever it was not possible to pay for open access publication fees, was to look into the journal regulations or terms and conditions. And a lot of times, more likely than not, they actually permit the preprint publications in one of the repositories, whether that's bioarchives, Zenodo, etc. So in that case, maybe the article will not be published, openly published, but at least the majority of the content would be publicly available if somebody wants access to it. So that might be one kind of roundabout way of solving the problem, although it's not an ideal solution, but you know, it's some fix for the solution.
But if you cannot publish fully in an open access journal because it's too expensive, then go for the regular journal. And there is always a mean of justifying. I mean, because it's very expensive. Actually, when we report for the European Commission, they ask you if it's a green or gold publication, and then how much money do you spend for that? So indeed, it's a trick, but I don't have a nice solution for you, but I think what you just said is perfect.
Joe, are we asking questions now, or are we doing this later?
Well, I think we might. Yeah, we can go ahead. I think we can have one more, and then I'll move on to David, and then we can speak some more. Francie, do you want to ask?
Yeah, just super quick. Sorry, just as a very fast comment. So listening to the presentation, you raised very many valid points. But let's say I was a small CS practitioner or a high school teacher or something, and I want to do some marine sampling to organize, and I'm not necessarily working with the people aware of all these regulations, or maybe I'm working with fishermen, etc. Do you have any practical tips, or where do I go as a small CS starter to find all this? You know, how do I not do harmful CS? This was a practical question that reaches us sometimes.
Yes. I never had to answer this question. I would say maybe it's your role as a European project to provide this type of information, because probably at schools the teachers do not know. So maybe in your playbook or handbook, I don't know if you will be publishing something. So otherwise, yeah, because permits but I mean, at school, if they collect some water, it's not for genetic resources. It's more for looking under a microscope, what are the different bacteria or phytoplankton. So it's not a problem. The problem is regarding Nagoya Protocol is regarding the use of genetic resources. Now, regarding the maritime affairs, strategy and security, this is under the territorial, so they should know. It's like in France, it would be the préfet, the maritime territorial, who should be the one giving you the restriction. And like in France, I know this legislation, it's an old decree, but the legislation was applied last summer, so it's very recent. So this is, I think, first, teachers maybe should contact their territorial authority to ask if there are specific requirements. And then it's up to you, yeah, to disseminate.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Michelle. Yeah, we will come back to some questions. But yeah, for now, I'd like to hand over to David for his presentation.
Okay, so I'm David Resnick. I've been introduced to earlier. I'm a bioethicist at the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, a branch of the National Institutes of Health. And I'm pleased to be able to talk to everyone this afternoon for you guys, morning for me. So we'll talk about a few topics: authorship, and citizen science, and data ownership. And then we'll talk about artificial intelligence, which that could go on a long time, but we'll see how far we want to go with that. So as you all know, authorship is very important for giving credit and recognition for contributions that people make to scientific works. And, this is, very crucial for people in professional science, people that are graduate students, postdocs, assistant professors, whatever. They need authorship for their career advancement. But it's also important for citizens as well. People that are not professional scientists, they want, authorship to feel good about themselves, to have their work recognized, and so on. So it's really important. Everybody cares about it. In the job that I do, we often have, disputes about authorship and it's not, not all that common, but it does happen. And these things can be very contentious. Who gets to be an author? Who gets to be the first author? Things like that. So another reason why authorship is important is it provides accountability for the work. So if something happens, it's the data are not reproducible, or there's a problem with the analysis, or the methods, questions arise later after the research, has been published. People want to know who's responsible, who did this, who collected the data, who did the analysis, and so forth. And so you have the authorship list so that you can provide this accountability. And a lot of journals now also actually, when you list authors, you also have to describe exactly what they did on the work, like whether they collected data, helped with research design, did data analysis, and so forth. So important thing about authorship is it's a function of what you do, not who you are. So it really should make no difference whether you're a professional scientist, a citizen scientist, technician, student, whatever your role is, that should make no difference at all to whether you have authorship or not. I think that's an important ethical point that not everybody has always felt that way. In years past, a lot of professional scientists would say things like, well, if you're a technician, just because you're a technician, you have that role, you don't get to be an author because that's not what you do. That's not what you're paid to do. And most people now realize that that's not a good reason for denying authorship to somebody. So these are the guidelines for authorship that are widely accepted by most biomedical journals, environmental health journals, public health journals, medical journals, biology journals, and so on, and even non and biomedical journals accept something like this. And these are from the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. So authorship is based on, one, making a substantial contribution to the conception or design of the work or the acquisition, analysis, and interpretation of data for the work, and drafting the work or reviewing it critically for important intellectual content, and final approval of the version to be published, and agreement to be accountable for all aspects of the work and ensuring that questions related to the accuracy or integrity of any part of the work are appropriately investigated and resolved. So in addition to being accountable for parts of the work done, an author should be able to identify which co-authors are responsible for specific parts. In addition, authors should have the confidence in the integrity of the contributions of their co-authors. Those last 2 points are important, but they're getting very difficult to really satisfy with large projects. You have hundreds of people working on a project. You can't really know what everybody else is doing, and you can't really vouch for the trustworthiness of everybody on the project. You hope that everybody is trustworthy. You expect that, but it's really not always possible to know. So the thing that that generates the most controversy in this policy is the thing I have in bold: substantial contribution, right? What does that mean? And it's not defined by these guidelines. It's not really defined anywhere that I know of. It's mostly depends on the discipline you're in. It's a very fact-intensive inquiry to figure out whether a contribution was substantial or not. You really have to know a lot about the project and what was done, what the standards of research are in that field, and things like that. So looking at, just say this in terms of citizen science, what would a substantial contribution be to one of the project involving citizen scientists? So suppose a water quality project includes data from 500 citizen scientists. So their collective contribution is very substantial, right? I mean, you can't, they're the ones collecting the data. So, but if it were just one person, you'd say, yeah, they're an author. But the problem is you got 500 people, and you divide that, contribution by 500. And so each person's contribution doesn't really seem all that substantial to where they would be, warranted to be authors. So what should you do in a situation like this? Well, I think probably the best option that a lot of people have suggested is something like group authorship. This would be like you give the citizens group a name, and some have even suggested that it could have a digital object identifier for the name. just so it could be used over and over again, be identified. But anyway, the group would be given a name, and then there would be a list somewhere of all the people in the group, so that they would get recognition, but as a group, but not as individuals on the authorship list. Another thing you could do is if this group is not named as an author, the group could be named in the acknowledgements. You could possibly list individual citizens in the acknowledgements, although that probably would get too lengthy if you have 500 people. And probably the thing to do is, whether it's in the acknowledgements or the authorship list, if you've got 500 people, is you have some kind of supplemental file or supplemental information that lists all these people on there. Let me move on. I should just say at this point too, nothing in this guidance precludes an individual citizen from becoming an author as themselves. I mean, you could have 500 citizens on a project, but it turns out that maybe one or two or a few of them really get very significantly involved. Maybe, they help out with a data analysis or something else, to where you might think that for them, that's really a substantial contribution, so they could actually become authors in a situation like this. Another thing that you can do to give people credit is, even when they're not listed as authors or named in the acknowledgements, their contributions can be recognized with a letter or certificate of appreciation. I think this is a really important thing for people. That just, it means something. It means that you care and you are thinking about them, even if they don't get listed on the paper or whatever. Okay, so let's talk about data ownership. And this sort of came up, a little bit earlier, where there was discussion of data sharing and all that. And that's closely connected to ownership. These are different issues, but so most research institutions assert that they own the data. When you are a professor or whatever, that's something that you'll be told. If you go work for a private company, they'll tell you they own the data. And why is this? Well, one of them is for intellectual property. So there have been lots of disputes about patents, other forms of intellectual property. When somebody works one place, then they go and they move to another place, and then there's some fight over the intellectual property that related to their research. So this is why, one important reason why institutions say this. Another reason is that for data integrity, if there is a problem with the research, like there's an accusation of research misconduct, or there are issues with reproducibility of the data, or you just want to audit the data, you need to go back to the original data. And you need to be able to get to that data. So you need to claim ownership over it so that you can be sure that you'll have access to that data. The third reason is for regulatory purposes. The Food and Drug Administration in the United States, the Environmental Protection Agency in the United States, I'm not sure what European organizations would be relevant, but they've got all kinds of regulations requiring access to data for projects, so regulators can have access to data, and you need ownership claims for that. So these claims, usually there's not really much argument about them most of the time when you work for a university, because the university or whatever the organization says, well, they were collected in our facilities, you are working in our lab, so that's our data. Or you can also say, hey, you were using our money, it was our money that was paying for this. You were using our equipment. So, all of that makes sense when you're like working for a university or a private company. But when you're looking at citizen science, things are definitely different. So data may be collected in the field, not in some lab somewhere. You may not be using institutional funds at all. It may be just free, you're giving your free labor. And you may not even be using institutional equipment. You may actually be using your own equipment. So these things that seem to give ownership control to the institution don't seem to apply so much, when you're a citizen scientist. So given all this, it seems that sometimes citizen scientists have strong ethical reasons for claiming that they own the data, not the institution. It's, hey, it's my blood, sweat, and tears in the data. You don't tell me what to do with it. It's my data. Well, I definitely can understand this viewpoint. People would think about it this way if they're citizen scientists. But if you want to, work on a project with professional researchers, you need to have cooperation, right? Because there's going to be issues concerning storing of the data, access to the data, analyzing the data, sharing the data, depositing the data like in publicly available databases. You're going to be required to do that by most journals now. And so for all of this, it's just not going to work if you as a citizen say that I own the data. You kind of have to agree to, to turn over the ownership of the data to the people that are leading the research project so that they can handle all of these issues for the project of managing the data. It's not going to work if individual citizens are trying to do all this and handling all this. So I would, suggest that professional scientists and citizens groups should reach agreements prior to initiating projects concerning data issues. So this when you sign on as a citizen, there should be something preferably in writing concerning these data ownership issues and all that. So I would say that citizens should transfer their ownership to the institution, but they could retain some rights, like the right to be informed about how their data are being stored, used, and shared. And that's very similar, actually, to what you see with human subjects research, where if you're a human participant in a research project, you sign the informed consent, but often the researchers will tell you that we will, inform you about what's being done with your data or keep you posted and things like that. So the last thing I want to talk about is artificial intelligence. So AI is playing an increasingly important role in research. It just seems like people are finding more and more things you can do with data. Just very basic things people started doing with AI now would be to analyze data from huge data sets. AI can do this and learn from the data a lot better than statistical methods we have now. You can use AI to analyze images, for example, MRI images of the brain for diagnosing brain tumors. AI can be trained, very well to analyze images, just as well or better than people. You can use AI to model things like model the structure of proteins, model complex ecologies, things like that. And so AI is writing papers. We have these chatbots. ChatGPT is helping people to write papers and references and so on. So I think really we could go on it. We could talk more and more about it, but it's almost no end in sight to what people are going to be doing with artificial intelligence. Now, this artificial intelligence raises and continues to raise some very difficult issues in science. One of them is bias or systematic error. So it's been well known that different AI programs generate biases. Like we've had programs that have been biased, had racial or ethnic or gender biases related to their output. I think Google was using maybe it was Amazon, I can't remember, some company was using a program to recommend people to hire as computer programmers, and it was biased against women. Well, that's not all that surprising because the data that it was fed was mostly males in computers. And so it was going to be biased against women because of the bias inherent in the data. So the data that the AI is trained on is a very, big source of the bias. There are other sources of bias too, and so this requires really a lot of vigilance with the developers and the users and everybody, those impacted, to try to reduce bias. There are accountability issues with AI. If an AI makes a mistake, who's responsible, right? If you have, let's just say, I won't talk about science for now, but just talking about, let's say, autonomous vehicles. I don't know if you have autonomous vehicles in Europe. We do have them in the United States. And there's the issue really of like, if a autonomous vehicle has an accident, who's responsible? The company, the developers. You can't really say that the AI is responsible because as far as we know, these AI are not like people. They're not moral agents. They're not responsible for their decisions. They're just machines that function according to some programming. And the same thing with authorship. Now, people have claimed that AIs are authors. They've actually listed AIs, say ChatGPT, as a co-author on papers. But journals have pushed back on this. I've written articles about this. I don't think that the AI that we have right now it's not capable of being an author because it lacks this moral agency. Maybe someday, but right now, that's not the situation. Another problem with AI, and it ties into all these problems, is the problem of transparency and explainability, or the black box. I won't go into it right now, but in detail, where you can later if you want. But AI, unlike older computer programs, it basically programs itself after a certain point. It develops its own sort of way of analyzing the data and representing the data to itself through neural networks. So that if you try to figure out, even if you're a computer scientist or a computer engineer, you try to figure out how the AI generated a particular response, you won't know. You won't be able to tell. It'll be too complex, too many numbers and calculations for you as a human being to know what it was doing. This is very different from older programs where you could actually go back and look at the computer code line by line and figure out what was going on. You can't do that anymore. So in some sense, it really is a black box. And the best you can hope to do is try to describe how the system works and what it tends to do without really being able to peer inside this black box. Now, the impact, I haven't heard much about AI on citizen science, and maybe we'll discuss more of this talk about more of this in the discussion. But it seems to me that the impact on citizen science is likely to be substantial. I actually think, see, the thing about AI is that AI needs data. It's really, good at processing data, but it has to have something to work on. And so, the big commodity today in business and science, government, whatever, is data. That's what people need to do all these, incredible things they want to do with it. And this is where I see citizens as playing a big role. It's like, well, if you need lots of data and, you have this army of citizen scientists to go out and collect it, right? So the data can be fed into an AI system for data analysis. So as long as we're not replacing people with robots, we're not there yet. It seems like you need people to go out in the field or wherever they're doing it to collect the data. So I guess what I'm saying is that it's because AI is making big data projects more feasible because we have ways of analyzing and interpreting the data. And so it seems like it makes a greater demand for citizen scientists. Okay, so I guess that's the end of my presentation. I think I'll take questions on my presentation right now. I know we're going to have a general discussion too, so I'll stop.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you. Yeah, very interesting talk on some very, very key issues. I mean, yeah, authorship in citizen science as well as AI. Does anybody have any follow-up questions from David's talk? I can see a couple in the chat, maybe one from Garabet and one from Dory. Garabet mentioning Creative Commons. Is that something you want to expand on?
Sure. That was a point raised to the statement who owns the data, now that citizen science are generating a lot of the data, whether it's owned by the citizens or the institution. Would licensing that data within Creative Commons as open access data everybody has access to be a good middle point of this, that the kind of the institution doesn't have full ownership of, well, ownership might not be the correct term, but the data is publicly available. Anybody could use it, including the citizens, and nobody has a stronghold over it. Isn't that usually the best case scenario or best possible way to move forward in these cases? Or are there also challenges or issues related to that?
I think that's a good point. I haven't thought about it too much. My initial reaction is you need to have a central place for the data. Problem with licensing, what if not everybody licenses it? Right? What if it's licensed at different times? What do you do? What do you do when prior to publication with the data? Right? I mean, maybe licensing could happen after the project is published, but I don't know if there are any scientists on this board that work with citizens here, but in my experience, there's a lot of cleaning and auditing and messing with the data before you're ready to publish, right? It can go on for years, right? The data analysis and all that can go on for years before you're actually ready to publish. And it seems like when all that's going on, you need to have some central point, an institution, a person, or whatever that has access to the data so that you can resolve all these data issues, right? That's just my thinking on it. What you're shaking your head, Garabet.
Yeah, no,
yes. What?
You're correct. I think there could be some, I mean, ideally, we've also seen a lot of citizen science projects, especially in the environment field or within the water domain, where citizens directly share on a website the data, and everybody has access to it.
Yeah.
So, for instance, with water quality data, when people are going and measuring, waters in their nearby rivers or the coast and the seas, everybody sees everybody's results. So on one hand, that is nice, but I agree with you that with regards to publication, that might also be an issue if the data is openly accessible. I don't know. I don't have a perfect answer to that. Stephen, yeah, sorry, Michelle.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, I was raising my hand and in fact it clapped, so I messed up. So in fact, to me, it looks like two things regarding what David just said. So first, it's essential when you inform the citizen in participating in the research, you may present the way how you will store. I'm not talking about his personal data. I'm talking about scientific data. So indeed, you can decide together and agree on the best way, but do not forget this concept of access and benefit sharing arising from the use of these data. Because maybe, so you have this dilemma of the publication, if the data are already released, but then you have also later on, I don't know, this kind of information will make a patent or whatever, there will be some money. And when you have money, it's even a more difficult question. So first, I would encourage you to store all the data like in an Excel file, who is providing what, to have something very clear, to agree right from the beginning when you collaborate with a citizen on, but it's about the benefits. What do they decide, do they agree on releasing completely and losing their ownership, or they are kind of, no, I would like to keep an eye on it, more than knowing where it's stored. But if there is, and when you have an agreement, you cannot always, in case of these data may raise some money at some point, even if it's 10 years, it's something you can write, and then it's acceptable. I mean, there is this concept of benefit sharing, and if you question yourself already in Europe, imagine if you work with citizens that are in low-income countries. So what is, when you work with scientists in low-income countries, you have also this very important benefit sharing. So it can be either a name on a publication, it can be you provide training to the students, you provide, you have to buy some equipment for the lab. So there are many, many different options that you can offer to someone who would like to have a return on their investment of their time and in getting the data. That's
Louisa, did you want to comment?
Yeah, hi, I have a question. So in a previous project, we were working with a research institution, so a university, citizen scientist on water quality, and the local administration. And at the beginning, we had the issue with the local administration that they didn't want to share the data. I mean, they raised some issues because they were afraid that, I mean, if the data were completely open, then there would be some political backdrops for them, for the administration in charge at that time. And so that was a little bit, we wanted to provide open access to the data because that was the aim of the project, and the citizens were also sharing their data directly on the website, so we couldn't really stop that. But I don't know, I had to convince the mayor in that case that, I mean, no misuse of data would have been done, and especially towards, I mean, the concerns were about political criticisms towards his administration. But this is something that when you work with local administration, it can happen. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's Yes, it's an issue. First, I think all data should be analyzed before being released, because there is, it's not one single point. It's the problem of the real-time release of data. So I would really go first and analyze this, and then you can also. I try to remember about. Usually there are some policies. We should be careful, or when for example, imagine we are interviewing someone and it's about politics, and then we are the anonymity of the person who is being interviewed, making some criticisms about someone that is above. The anonymity should be very well respected. So in your case, whatever the data are, you have to protect the anonymity of the person who provided this kind of comment or this kind of data. But then after, with the analysis, you have also maybe the excuse, or you can find there is an embargo. Maybe you can say we cannot release the data right. We need the time to analyze, and maybe alert the mayor about the issues and what are the option, or what are the measures he will take in the future to overcome, and alert him that you will be publishing this kind of data. But you cannot guarantee the fact that the data will not be misused, because you never know. And with social media, it's even worse. So yeah, so you have different options. First, protect the anonymity of the data provider. Then take the time to analyze the data. Then if there are some real criticism to a political institution, then contact them. Like a journalist, when you send a very bad comment about someone, usually you give access to this comment to the paper before publishing in the journal. So maybe it's a way. I never thought about it, but the importance of taking the time to analyze the data and to keep a track also of by anonymizing or pseudonymizing, because we never really anonymize the data, but pseudonymizing the data, because if you criticize, if there is a critique of the system, political system, for example, the political system should not be able to find out, to go back to the provider of the information. This is really important. You have to protect the person who are working with you, and to protect their personal data. I don't know if I answer, but these are.
No, that's great. Thank you. Yeah.
But I'm thinking, regarding your project, what is clear, you should define some kind of protocol or policy, and to try to have like a roadmap in different cases. And maybe at some point, by doing this, you may, okay, maybe at this point we will be facing this issue. So just by discussing all together, you can find a solution. You can establish an ethics committee who can help you. You can refer or contact a research organization to help you for that.
Yeah, what we did was we had the citizen sign a non-disclosure agreement, but still, I mean, so they were not able to use the data by themselves or publish on social media, but the data were going into a public database, so anybody could have used those data. So that was the fear of the political party of that time, that the data were going to be misused against the administration. But yeah, so only the citizens, I mean, the people collecting the data, they agreed on non-disclosing them, but still they were going on a public website anyway. So, and it's just that let's say, people who would have been critical to the political administration at the time just didn't know about the website, but they could have used the data if they wanted. Yeah.
A couple of things. Some of these issues could actually be put into an agreement you have with the citizens, that the institution agrees to release data according to professional standards. That could be part of their agreement, that they're not just going to suppress the data, right? And that if they don't, then you have a right to go ahead and release it yourself if the institution's not going to release it. This is one of the things you see actually with private industry, right? When you have contracts with private companies, the scientist working for the say university the company is not allowed to suppress the data, right? Same thing if a university was going to try to suppress citizen science data for political reasons, right? So you could put this into some kind of agreement. The other thing that is not ideal, and I can understand why people would have concerned about this, is selective reporting, selective analysis of data, cherry picking the data, right? That is a problem at all levels of science, right? As was said earlier, you can't just look at some data as they come in, right? You have to look at all the data. And a problem you get into if some scientists, some citizens are sharing the data, or some are sharing this, or they're telling people to look at this data and not that, is it can get cherry picked and distorted. The analysis will be distorted because of the cherry picking of the data.
It's a
so
bias.
What?
It's
you
a
agree?
bias. It's a bias. Yes, I agree.
That's a problem. And so that's why you kind of need a central place where there are protocols for analyzing the data, that tell you how you're going to do it, and not just like, oh, by the way, I have this terrible data I'm sharing with you now, and so you report it to a journalist or whatever. I mean, it's anyway. That's enough.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Some interesting conversation going on in the chat about naming rivers and turtles and various other entities as legal entities in ownership papers. Worth taking a look at. Does anyone else have any questions for David or Michelle, or just generally for any of the participants? Garabet?
I just read very quickly the links that someone provided in New Zealand. So here, when we talk about indigenous culture, either in the Arctic, Antarctic, or in Guinea, or in these countries where there is this strong indigenous population, their relationship with the nature is completely different from the Occidental one. So when you go there and you want to do something there, you really have, it's not only about the country providing authorization, it's about also the cultural dimension, the head, the chief of the village, or everything is about agreement and negotiation. And I'm not surprised that because of their culture and relationship, which is really different, their consideration of the nature, which is completely different from ours, that rivers became a legal entity, which will probably never happen in Europe. But it's something that I'm not completely yeah, I think it's relevant. It goes with their culture and with the way how they see the nature. So I think it's all about culture and nature. So.
Did you have a comment on this, or should? Okay. I just had, yeah, well, a couple of questions on AI actually that would be helpful to bring up. But Franzi, do you want to go ahead and then I can ask them?
Yeah, I take the bait basically. I had a question on AI, but more not so much about the dangers of AI or what happens if it goes wrong, but rather on the opportunities of it. How can we use AI, or do you have experience to share to actually improve citizen science data collection, reduce bias, etc.?
I don't really have any thoughts about, you mean how citizen scientists can use AI?
More like the people designing the experiments or the collection campaigns or whatever. Can we use AI to make something more equal, make something better, reduce bias from the beginning when designing the protocols, etc.? Do you have any? Are you aware?
I think that the great power of AI is its ability to analyze the data coming in, from and I mean yeah, I think it could be very useful that way. But that's not something, I don't think it's something that the citizens will be doing so much as the professional researchers analyzing the data. But there is something where I think citizens may have a role, and I don't know if anyone's doing this, but AI models need to be trained. A lot of them have to have supervised learning by humans that tell them how to do certain things, like distinguish between a brain tumor and normal tissue on a slide, or recognize a star formation or whatever. There may be a role for citizens in training AI models, because that takes a lot of labor. I mean, that's where I see the really big contribution of citizens that I see. I mean, not to be exploitative or anything, but it's that citizens, when you have citizens working, you have a huge labor pool that's not, that you can do these big projects that you couldn't do if you just had, researchers in your lab doing it. Someone's got their hand up. Alexandra.
Alexandra, do you want to ask a question?
Yes, I did. Hi, thank you both of you for those presentations. Very interesting. I'm very new to sort of the field of citizen science. And I just had some questions around sort of data integrity. So how do you sort of data assurance essentially? So you provide the training for the citizen scientists, they sort of go out, do the job and come back. How can we put any QC on that data? So in a lab, we can definitely do that, but in that sort of field, how do we come to terms with that? I'm an analytical scientist by background, so this is where I'm just trying to equate the two in my brain.
It's definitely been a concern about data integrity. Obviously, there's has to be a lot of training up front about data integrity issues, issues with reproducibility, accountability, transparency, record keeping, really good record keeping. If they're going to be using some kind of equipment or whatever, proper calibration and how to use the equipment and so forth. But beyond that, it seems like you kind of then turn people loose and say, go and collect data, right? After all this training. And there has to be trust that goes on, but trust and verify. So I would encourage, regular review of the data you're getting, to make sure that they're doing it properly, to see if there's any anomalies or inconsistencies in the data that seem like, there's a problem. I mean, it's kind of like if you manage a lab, I mean, I work with students and, we have, I ask them to turn in their data to me every week, so that we can go over it and make sure that everything is, correct. So that would be my thinking on it.
Do you know of any statistical techniques or something that we could apply, multivariate analysis we could apply to the data post to like maybe pull out some of the oddities? Or is that being a
I
bit too,
don't
or is
know
that
of any
circling around to cherry picking
offhand.
again?
Yeah, but there are statistical programs. There may be some available to you where like you can, yes, they can pull out oddities. They can look for things like non-random numbers, like humans are not good at making up random numbers, and they can you can have programs that can spot stuff like that. Other sorts of anomalies in the data, yes. I don't know of any offhand, but they're definitely out there. It's called forensic statistical analysis of the data, stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay.
But I would hope that you don't have to, well, I mean, I would hope you don't have, I would hope you trust your citizens enough that you don't have to do this. But, it could be maybe like you say, okay, we're going to randomly audit the data. You could audit everybody's data. If you don't have time to do that, you could randomly audit data to check for things like this.
No, definitely. Like we definitely do trust our citizen scientists. It's just I'm playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
The review process for some topics can be quite vigorous. And sort of my other question, sorry for taking a bit of time, is so for some of the projects I've been involved in, we've released public-facing reports of the results. So, the part of that communicating the results back to the citizen scientists, which are non-peer reviewed. They're just sort of like internally reviewed, then sent out. But then we would like to publish those results in a scientific journal with open access. But we're sort of at risk of self-plagiarizing or repeat publishing. So I wonder if you have any thoughts around that for either of you.
Well, I mean, cite the previously published thing and quote sometimes when you're going to use a lot of text. And if you're not quoting, do your best to try to rewrite it a little bit. I mean, it's the same problem that a lot of research, we're having today. You publish a lot of stuff, you run into the problem of self-plagiarism. It's not not easy to fix because if you published or not, there's a lot you're just kind of stuck with what you've written already.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, thank you for your thoughts.
Yeah. If I can come back to your first question, I would say the training is really important. Prepare a very clear protocol, then the FAQ, the fast answers, and maybe try to think to explain why this step, if you need gloves, if you need to do this way, why it is so important. Because I would really, and then maybe produce some videos explaining. Maybe instead of writing, you have something explaining this is the way. If you do differently, then this will have an impact on. I would say if you want to maintain the trust with them, just demonstrate that you trust them. But if they follow very well the protocols and the things like this.
Great, thank you so much.
Great, thanks. I think we've got about sort of 5 minutes left. Do we have any other questions from the floor for Michelle or David?
I have a question. I'm not sure we're going to be able to answer it in 5 minutes. It was about the issue of transparency with our citizen scientists of how the data is going to be used. This was brought up in both presentations, I think. And I'm thinking out loud here a bit. The problem that I see nowadays, especially with the integration of AI and big data, is like you mentioned, David, AI is being trained on a lot of public data. And when you release your citizen science generated data publicly in, say, an online repository, chances are it might be used by AI in so many different ways. So in being transparent with the audience and telling them how the data is going to be used when more and more these technologies are becoming prominent and that data might be used in so many different ways that we still maybe cannot even predict is very difficult. So in terms of the agreements that you mentioned, the written agreement that we sign off with our citizen scientists, short of saying this data could be used in any or all sorts of ways, I can't imagine how to refer to a statement like that. So technically, we're saying you're going to produce this data, and it might be used in any shape or form for commercial reasons, for whatever. Is there any other possible? I mean, sure, this is from a legal perspective, it might kind of protect us, but from an ethical and transparency perspective, it is very vague and doesn't say much. So how would you tackle that conundrum?
Yeah, I don't really know. I'm thinking about this out loud. When data are not publicly shared, like when you're just sharing data with other researchers, you can tell them we're going to share with so-and-so or whatever. But when you're putting the data on a public website, you have no idea who's going to use it and for what purpose. So you're right. I don't know what to say about that other than that other researchers could use this, for various purposes. Maybe you should even tell them that AI could scrub the data. AI could use it. I haven't thought about that. I mean, that suggests to me that we may need to rethink our informed consent documents when we enroll human subjects and tell them something like this,
In fact, there is no...
Your papers, when they get published, are going to be read by AI. It's kind of scary.
That's the big issue, because here we are talking about environmental data, so it's not like we are touching upon very, very hot topic, but still you are right. Also, AI can also work on private data, not only on the open access, but so in fact, what we should raise, it's at the European or international level, we need a way to secure this data. Maybe how can we track them? Do we want to track them? What is the kind of policy? And even though there is a policy, things are going like that. It's like on social media, when you put something, information, you never know how it will end up. So I don't think you can, this has to be clear. And I would say AI, when you talk about AI going on open access data, you're talking about ChatGPT, right? Because usually modelers, when they develop, they are not necessarily taking public database or data. It's mainly ChatGPT or the bot.
Well,
no?
There are several...
Possibly, but there could be specific applications of different AI systems. Let's say somebody's interested in water quality data, developing a model for analyzing water quality data. They could get their AI to search the internet for all this data, and then they could find your data and use it.
So in fact, what I suggested to some project is to have maybe a registration process. People who want to use this data, which are open access, just need to register. It's not like you prevent the use of data. The data are still there, but maybe by putting this registration process, it means that it's a physical person who can have access to this data, and maybe you can have, not sure by this way, not really, but a track on what will happen. But I do not think you can track. But you see, You prevent the full open access by giving access to this data, open access data, but through registration. And people maybe should explain the objective of what they will do with this data, who will be working on this data, or what kind of models will be using this data. I don't know, maybe this is an option. But I'm not sure. It's like suggestion that nobody so far applied, but it's a recurrent issue in research activities.
Yeah, for now that might work. I guess for another year until AI learns how to register itself as a human.
Yeah, well, you are not a robot. But at least for the length of the project, that should be fine. But you know, it's an issue that you should raise to the European Commission level. Something, you know, that you can try to experiment. You are developing research activities with citizens, so this is not fully clear. So maybe at the end of the project, you can have this kind of white paper or this question, and same to the Commission. We try a few things. It doesn't work. It works, but this is a real issue, and then think about this in the future. And try to know. I think it's a two-way. You are developing a new kind of project, so you should. This is like a pilot project, and you should give some feedback to the Commission.
Thank you.
Okay, great. I'm aware that we're slightly over time.
Sorry.
No, not at all. Does anybody have any final burning questions that they'd like to ask? If not, then I would just like to say, a big thanks to Michelle and David for their time and for coming and for their excellent presentations. And thanks to everybody who joined, for taking the time. I think there's been a lot of food for thought, and very informative. So just want to say thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.